Welcome to Health Innovators. I'm Paul Tunnah, and today's guest is somebody, it's probably fair to say, one of the first digital health entrepreneurs. Very warm welcome to Fredrik Debong from Hi.Health.
Thank you so much, Paul. Good to see you again.
Yeah, you too. And Fredrik, obviously, we met a number of years ago. I can't remember how many years, but a while ago now.
200.
And I think, yeah, in time flies, doesn't it? It goes very quickly. But I think when we first met, you were in the midst of mySugr, which people have probably heard of. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that before we get onto Hi.Health. But before we get there, let's go back even further, because some people might not know your background. I'd love to hear your journey into becoming a digital health entrepreneur.
All right. The long one or the short one?
Okay, for the middle version, whichever you feel is best.
All right. So I was born in Sweden, and born and raised in Sweden until I was around 24. I started programming when I was around 13, 14, mainly because I found this thing called the internet. And started playing around and just used this view source function of Netscape, and was really excited about what can I create on the web, right? So I learned programming in my spare time when I was 13, 14. When I was 16 in high school, I dropped out because I was tired of it and wanted to build something. I got a job within a week as a programmer in a group called Icon Media Labs. And that was my first job, right? There, I worked for around 6 months at Icon Media Labs, building up 2-3 different things. I was working on Volkswagen's first web page and on, let's see, what else? The Alps.com was the main project I was working on.
Right.
And it was... I was like an assisting art director, front-end programmer thing, I guess. We had a lot of fun. I went back to school after that, though, but I always kept working at the same time. So I joined a group which built one of the first e-bank systems in Sweden.
Yep.
While I was still in high school, and had a team there of 15 people, I think, that we worked together on it. It was fun. After high school, I started working as a programmer and systems engineer, and started setting up automation programs for the Swedish Stock Exchange, ETF trading websites, and we built up a system where we started giving like the ticker updates, right, to brokers of the Swedish Stock Exchange on their pagers. Yes, pagers.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun, but after a while, I wanted to start studying. So I'd become very excited about genetics. So I applied for Uppsala University to study bioinformatics. So how do you use computer science and data science in statistics in genetics, and got accepted. And then my my wife's father passed away. And she wanted to be close to family. So I moved to Vienna with her. Instead of studying bioinformatics, I ended up doing medical computer science. And while at the university, I kept working as a software engineer and had led a research project for a couple of years at the university. Had a lot of fun. While there, I formed a couple of groups, student groups, as well as a company called Pioneers nowadays. Pioneers IO is one of the bigger innovation conferences and organizers in Europe. That organization got acquired by Startup 300 in 2018. But I did that mainly because I'd failed at starting my own company based on the research project I had at the university. I realized that to create something totally new and actually make it work and bring it out to people, you need more than just the engineering skills.
Right.
You need business, you need medicine, you need people with experience and expertise in different fields on the team, not just 17 engineers. So building that organization was like extended education and intro entrepreneurship for me. And then I wanted to go back to what brought me into medical computer science, which was diabetes. Because I lived with diabetes since 1984. And that's been a huge burden in my life, of course. It's a chronic condition. You have to take insulin shots, which is a fairly dangerous drug, multiple times a day, test your blood glucose all the time, and see to it that you do well enough on this with this data-driven therapy. Otherwise, you will have issues. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to dig into the psychology of it and making the data useful in day-to-day life. And those two wishes is what brought me into forming Digital Health together with Frank, Mike, and Gerald.
Yeah. An amazingly diverse background, and you could have gone in many different directions, many different sectors. But I guess, your experience of living with diabetes and think about mySugr was probably a key driver, was it, for doing something in that space, trying to tackle that problem that was very personal to you?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit more about mySugr, because a lot of people know you for mySugr and, seen as a great success, rightly so, within the digital health space.
Thank you.
But when you look back on that, what are you most proud of? What was your biggest success, do you think, with mySugr?
What I'm most proud of is definitely that, we've known each other for a few years, so you've seen me present on mySugr before.
Yeah.
I often show this picture, this image of a forearm of a person called Matthias, who put a tattoo on his forearm. I actually have it here. Let me see if I can pull it up. There, right? Yeah.
Yep.
This guy.
Yep.
I mean, can you see that? Yeah, you can, right?
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
That is a tattoo. That's a tattoo someone made where mySugr's logo is part of it, right? And that is just, can you imagine?
That's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. That green little monster is part of, that app became such a part of his life that he wanted it showing, right? And that happened not just once, but twice, at least as I'm aware of. I think even 3 times. I heard rumors of that. But then you've impacted lives at a different level than I thought was possible in my lifetime, right?
Yeah.
And
that's awesome.
I think that's the thing I'm most proud of.
Yeah. And we often talk about
emotional one, at least. But there's also so much more, right? We were able to help digital health become serious, I think, and taken seriously by the FDA, by the EMA. We were able to help guide these authorities to understand that digital is different. And we were, I think, one of the first purely digital services, which also went through, that was able to get this whole thing going with regulations and ISO 13485 and all these things that were, it was all new to us, at least. And we had to kind of figure out how this can all work in an agile fashion with bi-weekly releases of an app and such. And I think that was one of the bigger hurdles which we were able to tackle and then help others tackle too.
Yeah.
That, I think, was, like, when you look back in 100 years, probably something from that is going to be what I'm proud of.
Yeah, I think that's a fair summary. I think mySugr was seen as a bit of a trailblazer company where digital health was interesting at the time, but as you know, interesting doesn't mean commercially viable or there's a future. And I think,
Or serious,
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, and I think mySugr showed some of that. And the picture of the tattoo you showed there, I mean, patient feedback is, as we know, is vitally important. But there's positive patient feedback, and then there's somebody tattooing on their arm the logo of your company. That's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing.
Actually, one of the guys, I think his name was Paul, actually lives in the UK. So
Right.
next time I'm over, maybe I should ping him and see if we can meet up.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be awesome. And then people probably know the kind of mySugr story. Obviously, at the time, big news, the acquisition by Roche. Number of years ago, I'm trying to think what year that was. What year was it?
17.
Yeah, so a few years ago now. And then you stayed with Roche for a while after that. Was it difficult to then kind of move on because you'd built up this company almost like your baby? Was it difficult to let go and say, right, I'm actually going to go in a different direction now?
Definitely. I think I still suffer a bit from that. It's we worked on mySugr for around 10 years, and it was an enormously rewarding experience, and so much in that company and the philosophy of it and the culture of it, it's comes from the founding team.
Yeah.
Leaving something like that behind is it was difficult.
Yeah.
And it took a while. So I decided after about a year post acquisition, together with Sebastian, to form Hi.Health to tackle a different problem in healthcare. When I'd seen, as I was working as head of R&D at mySugr, I was able to tap into all these experts working at Roche. Like I could tap into and start focusing on health economics and on psychology and on oncology and on everything, right?
Yeah.
And market access and how do you get insurances to actually deploy something, and HTAs, health technology assessments, and all these different fields that I was never able to tap into. And it was enormously interesting, but it led to me wanting to tackle a problem we saw in that. I saw there, like blatantly, was in your face all the time, right? So we decided on that about a year before I left. And then it took about a year to find like good people to replace these functions I was trying to fill. And yeah, then at the farewell party, it was a magnificent event.
Yeah. I'm sure. And as you say, I mean, being in a big pharma company, they're not the most nimble organization, certainly compared to startups. But a big company like Roche, there's an enormous amount of knowledge within that organization covering different fields. So yeah, I can see that a lot to learn from within there.
And I think that, like, if you look at what's happening in Germany now with a DIGA, as it's called in Germany, that apps can be prescribed and also paid for, reimbursed by the public insurances. These big organizations have one of the absolute key, the essential elements to make that actually work. A startup does not have the feet on the ground to be able to educate HCPs that there is an app for that, right?
Yeah.
And it can be prescribed and how it's done. 90% of the physicians, I am sure, don't have the capacity to dig in and learn how that works and which services could be used by whom, right?
Yeah.
And I think that companies like Roche or Novo Nordisk or Sanofi or others I've worked with through the years, they're going to be essential in educating the whole nation on that, right?
Yeah.
They have the feet on the ground. They have the relationships, the people to be able to educate. It has, so they need to step in and help the startups and reach some form of collaboration to make that happen.
Yeah.
So that's a unique position to be in there.
And it's a recurring theme, I think, in healthcare. When you look at digital health, people tend to approach this from a technology perspective. There's a technology problem here. But as you point out, and we've seen this many times, part of it, the human factor is really key. I mean, look at here in the UK, the NHS trying to digitalize medical records, great technology, but changing the way people do things and the way they work is really tricky. So tell me more about Hi.Health. Tell me more about what you're doing, what the business model is.
Everything, you mean, right?
Yeah, as much as you can share.
So, of course. So let's start with the problem, though.
Yep.
How many children do you have?
Two.
All right. I'm not going to ask if you also have a chronic condition or something, but I'll tell you a bit about my story and my experience with health insurance.
Sure.
I had 3 children. I have diabetes, and my wife had a very serious disease a couple of years ago. She survived. Everything is fine now. But the amount of money we pay to be able to access good healthcare with a private or supplementary health insurance system, we can access everything, but it's going to cost. In a year, we're out of pocket around nearly 12 to 15K. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Now, then you see that, okay, I'm well off now, right? I'm well off. So for me, that's okay. But is everyone? The burden, the financial burden of accessing good healthcare is huge. It's a cash flow issue for a huge amount of people. Nearly half of us in Europe feel the burden of healthcare expenses on our finance, right?
Yeah.
And nearly 15% find it to be a heavy burden on their economy. Even if we have public health insurance and supplementary health insurance and private health insurance, it's there, right? Insurance works, but there are a few hurdles there. One of them being expenses, right? And intransparency. And I think these are 2 issues we need to tackle to be able to make access to healthcare possible for people, right? And so that's why I became more and more passionate about removing payments from healthcare, right?
Right.
But then I found this little detail. A study from the 70s stating that it's okay with co-pays and shared payment for healthcare. It doesn't affect outcomes. Okay. I saw a big bug in that study from the 70s, and it's the fact that psychology and endpoints were kind of wonky, and they didn't mind the psychology. Turns out that, of course, if you have to pay a couple of euros extra, it's maybe not a big financial burden, but it's a hassle. If you increase, even though it's a minuscule amount, the price of a medication a person needs, the extra hassle is going to lead to fewer people actually cashing in that prescription.
Yep.
All right. So it turns out that thinking was correct. A couple of weeks ago, a study came out that pointed out that increasing the price of a medication by 10 euros led to 25% less people cashing in their prescription.
Wow.
Leading to, in cardiovascular segments, an increase in mortality of 33%.
That's incredible.
That's 10 euros. And here we're looking at, in private health expenditures, we see $2.4 trillion per year being thrown around, right? What's the effect of that on longevity, right? That's just obscene. And so a couple of years ago, we found this issue, and Hi.Health is set up to remove payment from healthcare. Simple as that. And we do this by integrating with insurances and taking the fintech place out there like Klarna, PayPal, N26, open banking, applying that over the insurances to be able to remove the burden on your cash flow and finances and get rid of that hurdle, which even if it's not, essential, the 10 euros for you in your economy, it is a hurdle to access. And so we'll remove it. Simple.
Yeah. Very practically, if we sort of describe it, simple language, nuts and bolts of what Hi.Health does, how does it work? What do you do?
All right. So we've done something quite simple. We've integrated with nearly all private health insurances in Germany, and we're able to file claims for people. So if you have an expense, a health expense from the pharmacy or the doctor's visit, you snap a picture of that and we submit it for you and see to it that everything is there to get the money back. And now lately, we've launched kind of like a banking infrastructure on top of that, or underneath it. I don't know which one to use here. Anyway, how it works is that we can now pay your bill for you. You don't have to go out of pocket anymore. You don't have to spend money anymore. We just exterminated healthcare expenses for 30 million people in Germany through this. Well, right now we have 20,000 users and growing, but all right, that's the goal. So what we do is we cover the expense and then we get the money back from insurance. And in some cases, the insurance only covers 80%, then the remaining chunk of money, the remaining 20%, we then get from your bank account or credit card. Through this, we've gotten rid of the admin burden as well as the financial burden, right? We do this through an app and also have a web app, but the mobile app is the most popular channel on iOS and Android. And in the background, we have a team of concierges that help check that everything is correct. Most of it is automated though, so we can most of the checks and balances are done already, right? But if something comes up, then there's a person there to call you up or message you through the app and take care of things for you.
Yeah. So if anybody's watching this and wants to start using it, I guess it's as simple as going to the App Store, downloading. And it's just in Germany at the moment?
Yeah, it's just in Germany right now because that's the first market where we prove ourselves now. Funny enough that the reviews of this application so far are close to 5 stars across the board, right?
That's great.
And the ranking of the application is rising so much that if you now look for submitting bills to insurance X, then sometimes we outrank the insurance itself. And that is driving a very strong, organic growth. Nearly a third of our users come organically to us now.
That's great.
And so far, we manage over 12 million euros in claims for our 20,000 users. And it's beautiful to be able to be part of that experience and help these people out.
And in a way, it's a really obvious problem, but no one's really tackled this before. I mean, why do you think that is?
I think it has been tackled partially, but always in the direction of B2B. If you look at companies such as Hi.Health, which is one of my absolute favorite companies in the field of payments and healthcare, they factor more or less, which means they buy the bill from the healthcare system, which is supposed to go to the patient. They interpret it and make sense of it, and then send it on to the patient and cash in, right? Now, and gather the money from the patient and or insurance. Now, they tackle B2B because they buy the bill for much less than the actual amount of the bill from the insurance, from the healthcare system. And then they can gather that money any way they can, right? So it's a B2B play. It doesn't really put the patient in focus, does it? Or in center. And so that's our attitude to it. Going directly to the patient, directly to the user, directly to the insured person, and offering to take care of everything for that person. That is the first time, I guess that's what we do the first time ever.
Yeah, bringing the patient perspective back into clear focus within this. And as you know, and probably better than me, healthcare systems around the world are very, very different reimbursement systems. So are you looking at particular markets as a priority? Do you think what you're doing could apply in theory to any market globally?
No, absolutely not. There are integrated systems, such as where I grew up in Sweden, which is kind of like an inspiration for Hi, right? In Sweden, you have Försäkringskassan. In the UK, you have NHS. It's an integrated system, fully integrated, which means you hardly ever have to go out of pocket and pay yourself. And that is something that the rest of the world should learn from. In the EU, we see around 14 countries which have systems where we can get rid of this burden. So it's not everywhere, which I'm glad for. It means someone has done their job.
Yeah. But 14 countries, you think of the impact that could make across different therapeutic areas, how many patients that could touch. I mean, that could be enormous, couldn't it?
Millions, yeah. If you look at outside of the EU too, alone in the US, you have nearly 200 million people having this form of insurance where we can help.
Yeah.
If you look towards Asia, there are countries where there is no solid healthcare insurance system, right? Where you always have to go out of pocket and take care of your own stuff, right? There's a lot to tackle across the whole globe.
Yeah. And so thinking back to your experience coming into Hi.Health and what you learned from mySugr and earlier experiences, is there anything key that you've done differently this time based on what you've learned before?
Good question. I think going into mySugr, I had personally not learned what I suck at. So I see my job now totally differently after having built 2 companies before. I'm an entrepreneur. What does that mean? It means you suck at most things. It means you're the gap stopper or whatever the term would be. Like, you do things until you find someone better. Yep. My job is to build a company, not to be the CEO of anything. CEO, CPO, whatever, right? I fill that role, but my job is to replace myself with someone smarter and not to try to shine and stand out, right? You have to live and learn and do everything you can to do your job, of course. But the job of an entrepreneur is to replace themselves. Mm-hmm. And that I see differently now.
Which is great advice for anybody starting a company, because I think there is this pressure when you do a startup to feel you've got to be good at everything. Mm-hmm. And in reality, to your point, no one is. No one's good at everything.
You suck at most things you do, honestly.
Yeah. So that's a very refreshing way of phrasing.
My attitude there is totally different than mySugr or Pioneers. Also, now I am, mature enough, naive enough, stupid enough, experienced enough, pick one, to think bigger from the start. And that helps us a lot. We're now nearly 30 people already, and we are already planning other markets, which new countries we're entering to, how to, we dare think bigger. And I think that's a great philosophical change also. Compared to just trying to make something work as we started out mySugr.
And on the fundraising side, which, as you know from your experience, is critical, and it's often an area I guess entrepreneurs don't understand that well when they come into these things with a passion for a subject. Have you found that easier this time around, based on your expertise and to some degree your track record as investors look at you and the company?
No, of course. It's yes, period. Nothing more to add, right? But I must also say that having a track record makes getting a meeting much simpler. Like, that's easy now. And you directly meet partners, but there's also much harsher, the sentiment then is that this guy has done it before. So he has everything lined up, right? Which means you kind of have to have everything lined up already. So
The
it's easy to get the
expectations kind
first
of,
meeting, but then the expectation is super high and you need to deliver.
yeah.
Now, luckily, I'm the stupid guy in the company, right? My CEO, Sebastian, is the smart guy. And I come with my background from mySugr and Pioneers and medical computer science and blah, blah, blah. He spent 7 years at McKinsey and has a PhD in game theory. So his methodology is just, and his method of working is so beyond my abilities that it's a very nice puzzle between him and I, right? Him and me. English, Paul, help me out. We work together in a very smooth
You work together
way,
well, yeah.
where we can push our methods and knowledge in a very nice way, right, to achieve more.
Yeah.
So that also helps, right?
And any advice you'd give to, you know, people earlier in their journey with a startup who are looking to raise funding about those kind of meetings?
Oh, yeah. You may have heard this one before, but pick your investors. If the investor you're speaking to only sees it as a business opportunity and not an opportunity to change the world together with you, kick them out. Not worth it. This person will be on your board and you will be meeting a lot. So see to it that you click and want to move in the same direction.
Yeah.
Also, when working with a venture capitalist, see to it you know the whole team. Because partners change. People change jobs. Being a VC is a job. So understand that the person you work with now in 5 years is probably going to have another job, right? See to it that the colleagues are also on your team already.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great advice. And it's a good reminder of, and I touched on this with another of these interviews I did recently with the chief exec of a biotech, that anything in healthcare, digital, biotech, pharma, it is about a balance of it's got to make money to get the investment, but it's got to have an ethical approach to be focused on the patient and delivering value. And to your point, that's a difficult balance. You know, finding the right investors that share that balance, I guess, is not always easy.
No, it's hard. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's come back to Hi.Health and take a look to the future. I mean, what can you share about plans in the next year or two? What should we keep an eye out for that's coming up as exciting milestones?
Sure. Yeah. Have you ever considered that to get access to the latest technology? Let's stay with digital health now, right? How do you get access to mySugr if your insurance pays for mySugr? Well, it's not super standardized, so usually that means you have to pay yourself first. All right. mySugr for 1 year costs 1,000 euros with coaching, unlimited supply of test strips. Now it can control pumps, insulin pumps too, and you know it works, right? But you still have to pay 1,000 euros. Why? Your insurance will pay for it in the end anyway. So we are now setting up a service for merchants where we take care of the billing as well as the reimbursement for the end user, which means that we will be able to offer you the ability to deploy your technology to the right people with the right insurance and reach them at once. And that they can get it for free. They don't have to go out of pocket anymore. They don't have to put in 1,000 euros. We do that for them. And so remove that impediment to the growth of digital health and access to the latest technology. We're now speaking with global medical technology providers, and we see that this is an issue all over the globe. To be able to access the latest, usually you have to pay first by offering our checkout system, more or less. we remove this hurdle, and that's coming in just a few months.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it goes back to what you were saying before. Even, I mean, $1,000 is a lot of money, but even smaller amounts, it's going to make people think twice about doing that, isn't it?
No, it's going to remove the need to think twice about getting access, because there's nothing holding you back anymore.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. That's great. And anything else that is coming up? Any sort of announcements or?
1,000 things, of course. But keep it relevant to your to our viewers and listeners today. I think that's the big one, right?
Yeah.
Remove the hurdle of payment from healthcare, so that you can reach the right people without them having to pay and like suffer the admin consequences of wanting to take care of their health.
Yeah. And I've got to ask you, because sadly it's still topical. Here we are in June 2021, COVID still lingering around. Any impact on what you're doing, positive or negative?
Yeah, we saw, as lockdowns set in Germany, which is where we currently act and where we offer our service. As lockdowns came in, we saw a steep drop in reimbursement requests and claims because people are at home. They're not going to the doctor as they should or as they used to. And then lockdowns drop and we see this huge spike, right? Where it used to be a couple of 100 claims per day, now it's suddenly like thousands, right? And we also see, it's fascinating, right? We have a real-time pulse on the healthcare system of Germany. Everything is like labeled, and we form statistics around it, like where we can see spikes in COVID claims or in flu claims and such. Like if you need to get stuff for, it's fascinating to see, to think that we can have a real-time pulse on the healthcare of Germany, right? Somehow connected to COVID. In the future, when we serve 1 million people, 10 million people, then we'll see what happens where, statistically.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fascinating thought, right? It also forced us out of the office. And it turns out it's a good thing. We're now nearly 30 people, and our office can hold 6 people instead of going wonkers and paying thousands and thousands and to set up a big chunky office. Everyone works from home. I'm sitting here in my kitchen and I'm moving tomorrow, so you don't want to see the living room. And it works. People actually like it. So what we're thinking about now is more of a different way of building our company and offices. So we set up hubs, right? We think around setting up small hubs, which are super nice to work in, but only hold like 10 people, 15 people in the countries where we act. So setting one up in Berlin, one in Vienna, going into other countries too. Won't tell you about that though. So cool. That change was also extremely positive. It forced me to think differently and us to think differently about that.
Yeah, very cool. And as you know, I mean, even some of the very big companies are thinking that slightly more flexible approach as well. I think it's forever changed the way we work, but I do think overall it's had a positive impact on things like digital health, because it's some of that behavior change that could have been done years ago without it. So don't get me wrong, COVID has clearly been a terrible thing, but there are some positives to emerge from what's come out of this. Let's come back to you personally, because we've touched on your background. I mean, mySugr was a tremendous success. I would imagine you don't need to work if you didn't want to, but you choose to keep innovating and doing these things. What drives you? What keeps you passionate about being in the digital health entrepreneurial game?
I grew up reading fantasy novels and science fiction novels, and there is this talk about good and evil, right? About doing the right thing, about keeping to values and having a positive impact, right? Saving the world. I think that as a human living in a modern society, you have such benefits. I live without insurance and without healthcare. I'd be dead at the age of 5. My debt to society is huge. And I want to help society move in the right direction. And so for me, that will always be the goal. Now, as an entrepreneur, of course, you can also capture a piece of the value you create. And I think that if you're able to create value and capture a piece of it, then secure your family, but dedicate the rest of it to positive impact. That needs to be a guiding principle in this field. And so that's what I do, at least now, right? I'm not altruistic though. I know that the value we can create will be huge, and I will be able to get some kind of positive impact for my family from it too. So it's not all altruistic here.
Sure.
But that is the guiding principle. Create good in your life. If you can, then you'll have to. And you can.
Yeah, it's a no joke intent. It's a healthy balance, isn't it, between value financially and value to society. And I think that's a really powerful and positive message to probably finish the interview on. So, I mean, Fredrik, thank you so much for taking the time. It's always interesting to catch up, and you always remind me of the kind of fundamentals, which are very basic of entrepreneurs or good entrepreneurs. Is there's a problem, how do we fix it? Which is often very complex, as you know, but it's starting from that fundamental principle and, following your passion. So thank you so much for speaking today. It's been a real pleasure to catch up.
Thank you so much, Paul, for your amazing work and helping this field move forward. And thank you for your time today.